everybody, and welcome to another Idiot's Guide with your local idiot, Ash. Today we're going to be going over the Marauder, which, just like the Gladiator before it, is a tank. That means you're going to be seeing a lot of exactly the same or very similar mechanics. So we're probably going to go over this one pretty quickly. Remember, if you find anything in an idiot's guide that helps you out or you actually enjoy, then the best way to reward me is with head pats and ear rubs. Now, where the Gladiator was your very standard sword and board knight type character, aesthetically at least, your warrior is going to be for those of you that really just love the big berserker barbarian with a giant axe type aesthetic. Because functionally, they're actually fairly similar classes. We're going to start off with your basic combat. What you're going to do to fight your enemies moment to moment every single time you engage an enemy. And just like the Gladiator and a lot of your other physical DPS classes and tank classes, you get your basic 1-2-3 combo. Your heavy swing into your maim, which has 250 potency if you combo it, into Storm's Path, which has 380 potency if you combo it, but also gets the added benefit of a 250 potency cure effect. So every time you combo into Storm's Path, you're going to be regenerating some of your own health. This is one of the defining mechanics for the warrior over the gladiator, is a lot of different mechanics to sustain their own health, which is one of the reasons why they're seen as one of the most capable tank classes, and why there's a lot of memes around the community these days that they don't even need a healer. But at this point, at level 30, this low level, you've only got a few mechanics to sustain yourself, and we'll get to them. Now that is your simple single target combo. If you're dealing with one enemy, if you're dealing with two enemies, you should probably be using this single target combo. If you're going to be dealing with, say, 3 or more enemies at a time, you're going to be wanting to use Overpower, and that's your AoE attack. Now, the Gladiator, his AoE attack went in a circle around him. But that's not how the Warrior's works. The Warrior's AoE attack is more functional to the Archer's AoE attack. It's a wedge in front of you. It's a pretty wide one, but you just need to remember to keep track of what area you're going to be hitting, because you may need to reposition around your enemies in order to get them all, in your AoE when you're doing it. With the Gladiator, it's pretty simple because you just run into a group of enemies and use it. With this one, you need to sort of position around the group to get the wedge off on them. And then beyond that, you have your ranged attack. Exactly the same as the Gladiators. It's useful for when you're avoiding enemy mechanics, or when you're out at the edge coming towards a group of enemies and you want to throw off an attack really quick before you close the distance. And it also has increased enmity as an additional effect. So if you're losing an enemy's enmity, this is a pretty good way to get them to pay attention to you again. Those are your basic attacks. The other thing you're going to want to be keeping track of is your buff, Berserk. Now, where the Gladiator's damage buff was something that affected them for a certain amount of time, Berserk instead affects a certain number of skills. So when you pop Berserk, the next 3 weapon skill attacks, so those are your GCDs, your normal global cooldown attacks are your weapon skills. The next 3 of those that you use are going to be guaranteed critical hits and direct hits, which means they're going to be a lot of damage. Now there is some perfect timing use case that can be had with this, but in general, If you have berserk and you're in a fight, use berserk. And that's all there really is for the basic flow of combat. Now for the more unique thing that the warrior has that the gladiator didn't, and that's thrill of battle, which is a healing skill. Right? The warrior gets a lot of mechanics to keep their health up. The benefit of thrill of battle is being able to increase your maximum HP, which is useful, but it's also useful to use when you're getting low on health, right? So it increases your max by 20%. It also restores that same amount to you. It's just a good way to increase your effective HP, making you tougher to kill against harder enemies, or give yourself a little health back, making the healer's job a little bit easier. And again, since it's percentage based, obviously, as your health goes up, it just becomes more and more effective. Beyond those things, everything else that we have to cover today is something that was already covered in the Gladiator video. And so I'll make sure to link to the Gladiator video so you can look at that for any more of like basic tank mechanics that every tank job deals with, right? The warrior gets a tank stance, just like Gladiator. It increases the amount of enmity you generate from every single action you take against enemies. They get provoke, which in very high level content, you'll do like tank swaps between two tanks, and that's where you'll generally use provoke in very high end content. But again, we're dealing with like level 30 and below right now, just your basic class. So you really don't need to worry about tank swaps this low. You really don't need to worry about those till like end game and extremely high level, like extremes and savages and raids and trials and all that stuff. All right. So provoke, you can, at this low level, you can treat provoke pretty similarly to the way you treat tomahawk, where tomahawk is on the global cooldown, so you have to wait about 2.5 seconds between each time you can use tomahawk. Provoke is off the global cooldown, so you can weave your tomahawk and provoke and easily get off like 3 of these, making enemies pay attention to you again. So you could do like a tomahawk on one enemy to get his attention, followed by a provoke to another one instantly to just get 2 of their attention, 2 enemies' attention, and by the time you're done doing that, your tomahawk will basically be back and you can hit a 3rd enemy. Now, provoke has a 30-second cooldown, so you can't just keep weaving back and forth. If you have to grab the attention of more than 3 enemies at once, often your best bet is to just run up to them and use your AoE. But if you can't for whatever reason or don't want to, then you're going to do like tomahawk 1, provoke another, tomahawk a 3rd, and then just wait for tomahawk to get like the 4th, 5th, 6th, however many others. And then exactly like the Gladiator before it, you get Rampart, 20% damage reduction for 20 seconds. That's great when you're fighting. That's great when you're running through enemies and pulling multiple packs of enemies at a time, because it sticks with you and just makes everything deal 20% less damage. And then you get Reprisal, which is not great when you're running through enemies. It's better when you're standing still and have already grabbed the attention of all the enemies you want, and they're now just gathering around you to attack you. Because Reprisal, remember, does not affect you. Reprisal affects your enemies. Reprisal is not a buff for you, it's a debuff for your enemies. And that's 10 seconds of them dealing 10% less damage. That's good in general. In just normal general combat, that's a good way to reduce the amount of damage enemies are dealing to you. Where Reprisal really shines is when you're in big trials, big boss battles, and you know the boss is about to do a big, very damaging attack. You can pop off a Reprisal on them really quickly and just reduce the amount of damage they're going to deal by 10%. It's actually quite similar to the way that you can use Feint on your physical DPS classes and Addle on, I think Addle's on most casters, actually, not just the DPS casters, but healers as well, where it reduces the amount of damage an enemy can do for a very small amount of time. But if you know a big attack is coming, using those before it goes off can just help reduce it in general for the whole party. And then, again, just like the Gladiator, you have your low blow to stun a target, nice to stun them out of an attack, or to just stun very high damage dealing enemies in general, just for a couple of seconds. But again, that may be enough to turn the tide of battle. And then interject. Now, I've gone over interject a few times, and it's really difficult to kind of show off how you should use interject against like a striking dummy. But in general, when an enemy is casting an ability and the cast bar comes up, I could show off some examples of this here. If the cast bar is this normal cast bar that you see pretty much every time an enemy is using an ability, then that means you cannot interrupt the ability. So using interject, there's no reason to. If you stun the enemy, you might be able to interrupt that ability that way, but it's really difficult to tell which abilities you can stun an enemy out of until you've tried it. But if the cast bar is flashing like this, then that means it is an ability that is interruptible. So if they're using an ability that you think will be dangerous, or just in general you don't want them to use, and it has that flashing cast bar like that, then you can use interject to force them not to use that ability. That basically covers everything you need to know about Marauder, at least up to level 30. As I said before, by the time you're getting up to level 30 in the main quest line of the game, you'll be getting very close to the point where you're going to be moving into your advanced jobs, and so those mechanics will work similarly in a lot of ways, but then you'll be getting more abilities, more mechanics, more things to weave, more things to keep track of, and so we'll cover all of that at some later point. Anyway, thanks for joining me for another Idiot's Guide, and I'll be back again some point in the future with the next of our classes. Bye-bye, everybody.